Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And the other day I was watching an animated version of, now I'm struggling to think of the name, Watership Down. This is the adaptation of that old book that seemingly shouldn't work, but it kind of does. It's about rabbits, but it's like an intense story about rabbits who get displaced from their home and they go looking for another one, but they run into other meaner, bigger rogue rabbits. It's really a pretty complex story. And at one point in the show, I'm watching it with the kids, and I was really proud of how well conditioned they are to think about story beats, because there's a point where they're being pursued. Some of the rabbits you like are being pursued, and they stop to celebrate and high five that they basically got away and everything's coming together. And all my kids are like, you can't stop there. You think about what just happened. You need to do this and this and this. And in that moment, my kids, who were the outsiders to this traumatic, difficult scenario the characters were going through on the screen, they were able to clearly see the implications of the situation. This just happened. Now you got to do this. How many times have you found yourself yelling that at the screen or at the page? Come on, think about what's going on. This is the only logical way to respond. But you got to cut the characters in these kind of scenarios a little bit of slack, because everybody, or almost everybody, wilts under pressure. It's overwhelming. It takes a minute to take stock of everything that's going on. And likewise, in Matthew 28, we got a situation here where there's a couple of ladies who just saw some stuff that doesn't make any sense, and it's going to take them a minute to figure out what the implications of that are. This is what I'm talking about. Matthew 28:1. After the Sabbath at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven. Going to the tomb, he rolled back the stone and he sat on it. His appearance was like lightning and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. Now, from the next verse, it's pretty evident that the ladies were a little bit troubled, paralyzed perhaps a bit with fear as well. But the angel says to the women, "Don't be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He's not here. He's risen, just as he said." Now, before we get into the part where he's going to tell them what to do and just shake them out of this moment of shock and confusion, I think it's at least worth noting the difference in their response and the guards' response. Because remember, this whole conversation, there's just a couple of guys who were there, and I guess they're still having seizures. I don't know. They shook like dead men. Are they laying there? Are they bolt upright? Are they halfway? Are they like fainting goats? Are their limbs all stiff? And it's kind of embarrassing when you think about it for them. And notice that the angel at no point is like, "Hey, guards, I know you're just following orders, so be not afraid." No, he's content to just let them fainting goat the situation, I guess. But the ladies, they're freaked out, but give them some credit. I mean, they didn't stiffen up and shake and go all catatonic like my buddy Adam did when I scared him that time on his birthday. And the angel wants to immediately set their minds at least somewhat at ease, but he also doesn't seem to want to take the pressure out of the situation. There's some stuff that needs to happen. There are implications to this. So you just get this one moment of celebration, of pause that we took yesterday, where it's like, all right, the seal is broken. Victory over death. Vindication for Jesus. The story of Matthew we looked at so far, it reframes everything, and we got to see that all in a fresh light now that the actual payoff has occurred. He delivered. This was real all along. What does that mean? And then from there, we see that the pivot is right toward physical, tangible evidence to be able to say, like, no, you're in the right place. You didn't make some kind of mistake here. You can tell by looking at me, but I'm an angel. Like, what you think is happening here is what is actually happening here. Massive paraphrase is mine. He's not here. He's been risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Now, we get this motif in a couple of the other resurrection accounts as well, that it's really important to see the spot where Jesus was and that he's not there anymore, and that the burial cloths are still there, or at least part of them are there, even folded up Like, not only did he come back to life, but it was a very orderly coming back to life. And he even swept up and took care of the space because he knew Joseph of Arimathea was going to need to bury some people in there later. And he wanted to leave it nicer than he found it. But also, it's an important apologetic detail because these ladies were there, again, the bookend theme, on the other side of the burial and resurrection. They're there on the front end. And they're like, all right, okay, well, we know what tomb we're talking about. We know what rock we're talking about. And we saw them put his body in that hole in the rock right there. Yeah, he's gone. Now, if you go and look at the other resurrection accounts, and we're going to, because admittedly, they're kind of overwhelming. There's a lot going on. On the surface, it looks like the timeline's a little bit jumbled, maybe even conflicting, as everybody's trying to make sense of what the heck just happened here. You got people going back and forth on the road. Remember, the people who are checking in on the tomb some of them are under severe duress and still at odds with the law and are thinking that probably they will be next if they identify too closely with Jesus. So the main disciples are still trying to lay low, but also they can't resist this news. And in all of this chaos and confusion and people not even recognizing Jesus when they see him. I mean, last time they saw him, he was beat to garbage. He'd been hamburgered on his back with a flog, a cat of nine tails or something. He'd been run through with a spear, asphyxiated. He's bleeding out. His visage would have been hideous. And in all the gospel accounts, when people start to see him, it just takes a minute to register. Like at some point, even hearing his actual voice is needed to understand who you're interacting with because of how dramatic this transformation is. Again, a motif that we see throughout the Gospels. You got Jesus in Galilee, you imagine more composed and not yet beaten and bruised. You have Mount of Transfiguration Jesus. Then you have Jesus of Passion Week going to the cross, beaten and disfigured. And then you've got risen Jesus, which isn't quite Transfiguration Jesus, but isn't quite Galilee Jesus either. Yet it's not a ghost. All the gospel writers give us at least one hint each, some more than that, to just say like, no, he's eating food, he's hanging out. He's physically back to life. He is a person who is interacting with people and the physical world around him like a living, functional person who still needs food to eat. So my point is, it's a lot, and the angel understands that it's a lot, and he's like, let's just get some verification here. This is the actual place, and now that we've calmed down a little bit, and we have a bit of an understanding of what's just happened here, there are implications. Just like in that scene in Watership Down, or basically anytime you find yourself yelling at a show, in light of what just occurred, okay, we probably better get moving. Some things need to happen now. Okay, you can't just stand there. You got to do something. It's so clear from the outside looking in, but it's difficult when you're in the moment. And so he's going to jar them loose with this. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he's risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I've told you. I love the way he just stamps that. Now I have told you. That's how the things are. I have spoken. But there's a little miniature commissioning that's happening here. I mean, it's not like the giant commissioning in Matthew chapter 10 or the one we're going to get here in a few verses at the end of 28 that Matthew is going to close this whole book with. But the women are commissioned right here. That's a big deal. They have a job. They have a task in all of this. And well, that's in keeping with what their role was like before. They had a job. They had a task. They're doing something here. Everybody else is gone. And now they get the honor of bearing this message, and it comes in two parts. One, okay, well, it worked out. Jesus came back to life. And then part two is, he'd like to see you. Now, we know from the other Gospels that they remained in Jerusalem for a little while and that Jesus interacted with them there, but it looks like his interaction with them that was fully realized, very human, extended interaction is going to happen back up in Galilee. So Matthew is going to start his story in Galilee, and he's going to round out his story in Galilee. This never was a story about going to the big town, and then now we've hit the big time because we're in Jerusalem. It was always a story that was going to begin in the Shire and end in the Shire. But if you read through the rest of the New Testament, and with any luck, you and I will do that together. I hope we get to have these conversations for a very long time. We got the new thing starting on January 2nd, where we're going to go through the whole book of the Bible, one book per day until we're done. Then we're going to do Esther when we're done with that. I already have an idea for what we're going to do next after Esther. So my point is, hopefully we'll get to see this play out together someday. But the quick version is this. As you work through the rest of the New Testament, what you find is that there's tremendous celebration and Christian joy in that the whole thing is real. God, creation, all of it, the kingdom, the new family of faith, you being initiated into the new family of faith, even with all your weird screw-ups and even for all the ways that you're an outsider and insufficient. That's the kind of stuff that apparently the kingdom's about. And that's the kind of person that Jesus welcomes into the kingdom. It's awesome. But then the next theme you see is, and there are implications to that. Okay, in light of what just happened, all right, like now you got something to do. Now you got a role that you play in this. And that's foreshadowed in Matthew 10, which is something we're going to need to go back and look at when we're done with all of this. But it's hinted at again here, and that the ladies get this news, and immediately it's, hey, that news has implications. Let's go and act on those implications. Final thing. This episode of the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast is brought to you by Samaritan Ministries, which just makes me so stinking happy. I appreciate them. They are a community of Christians. I say we are because I'm a part of this community as well. They're a community of Christians who help pay each other's medical bills without the use of insurance. There's no networks. You've got massive flexibility in terms of getting to pick what you want in terms of your health care. You get to pick your doctor. $99 is the starting price for a monthly share for an individual. $263 if you're a family is the starting point. Anytime we're dealing with anything that gets into that realm, it's a lot to think about. It's a big idea, and it's spelled out really well on their website, samaritanministries.org/TMBH. Thanks again to them for sponsoring the podcast, and thanks again to you for considering going and taking a look. I'm really liking this Matthew 28 stuff. More on it tomorrow. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.